spring is certainly on the horizon, and it's time to start thinking ahead and also considering ways that you can improve your summer garden this year. And a big way that I definitely recommend is adding more filler plants. It really is the perfect way to tie your garden together. A garden that's just full of specimen plants can often look like a library of plants or like an old style botanical garden. Whereas to me, the smaller plants that might not have that impact straight away, those are the real heroes of a garden. They let you add personality, themes, colour to a garden and really create a space that absolutely feels yours. Today, I want to look at 5 top tips that you can use to add filler plants to your garden this year. I have done some videos when I first started my channel looking at tropical style filler plant ideas, and there's some great tips in there. But more recently, last year, several garden visits have got some top ideas for filler plants to your garden. For me personally, this plant here, which is Mahonia Sweet Winter, I talked about this in a recent video, something I've added to my garden to bring more winter interest. And this is something I saw at Simon Maybury's Leeds Jungle Garden. I had to have it here. I really love this sort of sheen to the foliage, the overall look of the plant. A perfect little addition for those shady areas or underplanting. If you haven't seen my video looking at Simon's garden, I'll link to it in the description below. Definitely check it out because there's so many amazing filler plant ideas in there. Also, if you go through my back catalogue, there's a video looking at dirt cheap plants, Janet's plant nursery and garden over near Sheffield, and she's got an incredible summer display there. And a lot of it, surprisingly, is made up of smaller plants, flowering plants you wouldn't immediately assume to be tropical style, but when you see them combined together in the way that she's done it, it really does look incredible. So again, loads of practical take-home tips there. And if you haven't seen them, my video's looking at Mark's crazy tiki garden. There's loads of filler plant ideas in there from someone who pretty much has tried every tropical style plant going. He's got loads of different cottage style leafy plants in his borders. There's a lot of take-home tips. But today, rather than go through specific plant ideas, there will be some of those as well, I want to talk more generally about 5 overall tips that I use to add filler plants to my garden that will hopefully help you out this year. So if your tropical display is looking a little bit bare at this time of year, if you want more summer impact, then hopefully these help you out. So let's get started. Before I jump into my top tips then, let's look at some of the plants I've actually bought recently to add to my garden this year and tell you a bit more about the why. So that Mahonia Sweet Winter, that came from Craig at Grow Paradise, and if you check out my recent video looking at evergreen exotics, you'll see more about that. But when it comes to the far end of the garden, my sunnier, exposed, well-drained fire pit area, these verbascum were something that was actually mentioned to me in one of my earlier videos in the series, so I've gone for some this year. I suppose I could have grown them from seed, but I've been a little bit late as always. But these verbascum, I think they're going to be fantastic up there. I believe they're a biennial, not a perennials, it says in there. But these have really got that combination that absolutely fits the theme I'm going for. Blue, silvery grey foliage, like the eucalyptus, olive, yuccas and agaves, and then a yellow flower. So that is the general theme I've got up there. A nice blue general sort of theme, peppered in with contrasting warm spectrum flowers. So those will be beautiful. Nice big rosettes. I think those will look fantastic, particularly as well if any of the red hot pokers and other yuccas start flowering at the same time. Here we've got a plant which will be going at this shadier end of the garden, and it's none other than just an ivy. It's a trailing ivy. Now, I know you've got to be a little bit careful with ivies. Believe me, I've got some from next door growing well over into our garden. But this one, I liked how glossy the leaves are, I like how simple they are, and I think it'd be a nice ground cover to go in areas of the garden that are a little bit too shady and dry for other exotic plants. So I'm really looking forward to see that. Cover a lot of the soil, because ultimately covering soil is the goal of exotic gardens, isn't it? And at the back there, we've got a big grass. That one is a miscanthus, and it's rotapfile, or something like that. Again, I apologise if my pronunciation is offensive. I've already done it to France, so I might as well do it with Germany as well. It might not even be Germany, so I'm just being generally offensive, but that aside, this is a lovely grass. Grass is a great filler plant, and in the past, I've grown Miscanthus giganteus. I've still got that here. I've grown Arundo donax, the giant Spanish reed. There's a lot of smaller grasses like Stipa or Nasella tenuissima that I grow, as well as the massive Lutar riariporius, which you'll see at Mark's house, which is absolutely a monster. But for me, I've gone for this grass here because I wanted some height in an area of the garden that I've been developing recently. I want to share with you later in spring, and I think these will be perfect. A great plant that's not a huge exotic specimen, but certainly won't be lacking in impact, and it absolutely fits in with the tropical theme. And then for my other filler plants, these all came from Urban Jungle. It's more red hot pokers. Yes, Nifophias are a plant which absolutely fits the tropical style theme. I think really, as long as you've got a sunny garden, whether you want to go for a tropical or exotic Mediterranean look, these have got to be in there. And the ones that I've gone for are ones that I already grow already and wanted more of. We've got a Nifophia northii there, and that just looks incredible. As it grows up, it's one of the biggest red hot pokers. It has leaves that look like an aloe. So although the flowers are certainly an added attraction, for me the main reason you grow this is this massive evergreen rosette of really strappy succulent foliage. It looks incredible. And I think in some respects, filler plant is a little bit unkind because this is a plant that demands attention. And to me, it might actually replace that Yucca rostrata, which unfortunately rotted through or was eaten this winter. So I'm looking forward to that one. And over here, we've got some more pokers. Here, we've got Nifophia ruperi, which is one that I've already grown in the garden, and again, wanted some more, but my existing ones aren't quite at a size yet where I can split them up. So these are a lovely plant. Evergreen again, really strappy foliage, big flowers. This one gets to about 1.5 meters tall, so it's definitely got the presence. It's got the strappy leaves to fit in with an exotic or tropical style garden, and the flowers reach up to 1.5 meters tall. To me, this is a plant which has definitely been lacking in my garden. In fact, summer colour at that far end is something I want to make more of. So something that's got the same strappy leaves as a lot of the yuccas and grasses up there, and also those bright, bold, red, punchy flowers is definitely a winner for me. So that's what I've chosen, but what are the general principles I would recommend for choosing filler plants for your tropical, exotic jungle, or just generally exciting garden? Well, let's go into it. You can add almost any plant to your tropical style, exotic or jungle garden, and with the right planting and positioning, you can create that overall vibe and atmosphere you want. My first top tip is focus on the season of interest. Now, in my previous video looking at evergreen exotics, I looked at the Fatsia japonica spider's web, I looked at that Mahonia sweet winter, and then I also looked at the Sarcococca sweet box. They're all evergreens. They all look fantastic through the year. So if you've got a smaller garden or you're planting up a view that you see from your window all year long, maybe I'd focus on those to give some real structure. There's loads of really easy to grow plants that are tough and hardy that can fit in with that vibe and look great all year long. But if you're really going all in on the summer drama, if having an amazing summer display is your absolute goal, then evergreens, they can sort of blend into the background a little bit. They take a back seat as the big leaves and boisterous flowers come into play. So it makes sense to choose filler plants that completely fit in with that theme. And at that time of the year, I think really the big ricinus, the big miscanthus grasses, the Arundodonax, there's so many big plants that can add drama, add real density to a jungle or tropical garden. Perfect for the back of a border and perfect for making a small garden feel bigger. And even when it comes to the lower level plants, there's so many options for summer. But one of my favourites for the lower level planting, I know it's a bit old fashioned now, is Coleus. I think they're great for summer bedding. I know bedding is definitely an outdated practice, but to me, just having a few of those dotted through the garden, whether they're grown from seed or bought as plug plants and grown on, it really is a great inexpensive way of adding that tropical colour. So I guess what I'm saying is, in your mind, think about the area that you're planting up. What's your goal for that area? If it's at the far end of your garden, if it's not somewhere that you really go out to during winter much, then maybe don't worry so much about the winter interest. Maybe let yourself really dive deep into that summer display and choose plants that really come up and make the most of that season. Plants like the miscanthus, which look brown and half dead in winter, they can add so much to your summer garden. At my 5 end of the garden, although I planted that with a load of exotic Mediterranean beauties that will look great all year long, I think really once that area is finally finished, the main time we'll be using that is really late spring, but mainly in summer through to early autumn. So a lot of the filler plants really add into that theme. The sedums look great in early summer. Beautiful little flowers, perfect for the pollinators. I love them, and I think they're a great low level plant to really exaggerate the size and scale of the exotics around them. And then the red hot pokers you've just seen, the Nifophia ruperi. That one in particular flowers quite late in summer and early autumn. So that's why I've chosen it. So again, like I said, there are no rules. But if you generally consider the season of interest, I think it is the best way to make the most out of that part of your garden. Just consider, is this an evergreen area that you want to enjoy all year long? Or is it something that you really want to go all out in summer? Do you need some spring interest? In which case, choose ferns and other plants that will absolutely put on a show before most of your tropical plants get going. That's definitely my first tip. You'll see my Euphorbia robii over there. That's grown well. And over here, we've got a fern. And in fact, a lot of the plants that are in this jungle part of my garden especially are very easy, hardy plants. And I think that is probably my second tip. Choose filler plants which are easy, because a garden that's absolutely full of tender specimen plants, plants which need a bit of TLC in winter, that would definitely be hard work. So unless you're retired and you've got all the hours in the day to spend in your garden, for me, if you've got a bigger garden especially, choosing filler plants which simply do their thing and get bigger and better every year without much TLC or any kind of interference, they really are the key. As I said before, not every plant in your garden has to be tender, rare or unusual. But if you've got some big plants like palms, huge leaves like Tetrapanax, the companion or filler plants around them don't have to have the same kind of exotic origins. They can simply be easy plants which just get on with it. And I think really that is crucial. Yes, you can have a garden which is absolutely chock full of botanical rarities, but to me here in my garden, so many of the plants which simply get on and do the thing in the background are perfectly tough and hardy. It's well worth visiting your local garden centre and nursery in spring, see what plants they've got there, and you might be surprised at what non-exotic plants they've got which really grab you visually and will make the perfect pairing with a lot of the big exotics in your tropical style garden. I know it can often feel overwhelming, particularly for new gardeners. You want to know, will this plant live in my garden or will it curl up and die? And it's always good to have a rough idea before buying a plant if it likes your garden conditions. I generally split plants up into three main groups. So at one side, you've got plants which enjoy wetter soil and might like a bit of shade. So plants like the Gunnera, Ligularia, Chinese rhubarb. There's loads of plants like hostas and ferns which really enjoy those conditions. Then at the far end of the scale, you've got a group of plants which needs well-drained soil. Plants like succulents, plants that come from Mediterranean origins. Here in my garden, I've got the yuccas, off the palms. They really need that good drainage and full sun to survive here in the UK. But in the middle, you've got everything else. And as a general rule, if you want a plant from either end, you can move it one step across the middle, but you can't move it to the far end. So if you wanted a Mediterranean garden, but you've got a very waterlogged garden that sees full shade, you might struggle. Unless you have raised beds and really make the most of sunny spots, you're better off leaning in to that wetter end of the scale and planting plants that actually enjoy those conditions. And likewise, at the far end of the scale, if you want some big leaves in your garden, but you've got very well drained sandy soil, probably the Gunnera might not be the best plant for you. Whilst you can grow those plants in pots and containers, ultimately you may be better off leaning into the style of plants that naturally suit your conditions. For tip number 4, we're heading to my very weedy and unfinished fire pit project area. And tip 4 is choose plants that fit the overall look you're going for. The actual individual plant doesn't matter too much. And the reason why I've come up here, stood on top of this mound to show you, is basically to look at the overall picture. So if you look here, all you really see are the rostratas and the olive tree. Everything else is just supporting vegetation. But those supporting characters in the cast really bring the whole garden together. So in the middle there, you'll see that brown grass, Chianocloa rubra, I think something like that. That isn't a plant which you think belongs in a tropical style or exotic garden. But here, where I'm trying to create an exotic, arid or Mediterranean look, it works really well. I love how the foliage moves and how it really sort of matches in well with the yucca forms. And then at the base of the olive tree, I've got plants like Stachys byantia, a smaller one that I think silver carpet, or the lamb's ears, a perfectly normal garden plant. But here, the silvery leaves, low growing habit, look perfect there in the gravel, and it nicely mirrors the foliage of the olive tree above. So what I'm trying to say is, as well as thinking about the practicalities, choosing plants which match the time of the year that you want them to look good and the conditions you've got, it's also great to consider which plants fit your overall theme. So if you're trying to create a proper lush jungle garden, hostas, ferns, and all the beautiful glossy leaf plants are your friends. But if you're trying to create a drier, exotic look, then certainly look towards the silvery plants, the succulent plants, and the ones which naturally come from those parts of the world. It's not a coincidence that the plants which often have a certain aesthetic enjoy the same conditions. So really lean into it, explore, and don't just go off the plants I suggest in my videos. Look on sites like Beth Chatto, where you can choose plants by the conditions they enjoy, and you might just see some ideas in there that catch your eye and get you thinking of something you hadn't even considered before. My fifth and final tip for today then is one you probably already heard me mention in another video. Yes, there's nothing wrong with going to your local garden centre or nursery, shopping online, seeing a plant you like, adding it to your basket and planting it in your garden. That's fine, and there's a lot to be said for a variety of different plants. But when it comes to filler plants especially, I think you can get so much more impact and overall presence, real personality in your garden, tie the whole thing together by growing multiples of them. So yes, that Nephophia ruperi, the red hot poker you saw, that's a plant I've already got in the garden, but I'm adding 3 more. And that's because here, to dive into it a little bit deeper, for me, that plant is a great visual way of linking this jungle tropical part of the garden with the Mediterranean bit and the arid bit beyond. It's a plant which comes from South Africa, so in theory, you'd assume it likes sunny conditions, well-drained soil, but it can also thrive, and often does in those places, in wetter areas with richer soil. So it's a plant which practically should grow well in a large part of my garden here, and visually can really help tie the whole garden together. And I just like the idea of coming out the jungle bit, that lush, strappy foliage really ties in well there, looking up and see them dotted around the Mediterranean bit, and then also seeing one in the distance in the arid section. To me, it's that repetition of plants. I'm not the first one to say it, but it really is a great way of tying your whole garden together. And you can do this on other levels as well. So at our old garden, where I had a relatively small border, when it came to the filler plants there, a big favourite of mine was the China Rose Coleus, but rather than buying 1 or 2 of those and having a load of different Coleus, I went all in on the China Rose and had loads of them dotted around the front of the border. And just having that many of the same plant, it keeps the colour theme going, it visually just works well, and it really helps tie the whole display together. So that would certainly be my top tip. There's so many filler plants you can grow from seed, so even if you're working on a relatively small budget, there's a lot of unusual and exciting plants you can try. And really, if you've got absolutely no gardening knowledge whatsoever, anyone can push some nasturtium seeds into the garden in late spring and watch them grow and add some leafy, colourful goodness to your garden this summer. So there is absolutely no barriers to adding filler plants to your garden. I think really one of the main benefits of having a tropical style display is that you can vary it every single year. A lot of the gingers, the cannas especially, those plants can be moved every year if you want to. And around them, you can have completely different plants. So don't be afraid of experimenting. And probably another thing I would say is, if you're relatively new to tropical style gardening, I hope I've got a lot of other videos that might help you out, but don't be afraid of biding your time. There can be a rush to try the easy plants. And I know I've got a lot of videos saying, start with Fatsias, start with this, start with that. These are really easy plants to grow. But don't lock yourself into having a certain amount of plants, especially if you've got a small garden. Don't be afraid to experiment with annuals, with bedding plants. Just try and see what plants really excite you. You might find that over time, your tastes and interests change. So for me, as I've gone to the arid area of the garden, I've been inspired to try some completely different plants. And a lot of the plants I've got up there that really add the most to it in summer are simple plants like the poppies or even the sedums, which you wouldn't even think of as tropical, exotic or jungle plants, but they really add to some display up there. Yes, they tick all the filler plant boxes I've suggested, but I think leave a bit of room to be creative and leave a bit of room to try something different next year. But above all, don't be afraid to just go for it, try a plant in your garden and see what comes of it. Anyway, I hope those rambling tips have helped you out. If you've got any unusual, interesting filler plant suggestions that I haven't mentioned in my channel, feel free to leave them in the comment section below and I'll use them to help build my videos later in the year. But thanks a lot for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.